And North Texas Congressman Jake Ellzey of the 6th Congressional District joins me now to talk about the presidential race. Congressman, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Jack.
You bet. Good to see you. So first, what did you think of the now formed Democratic ticket of Harris and Minnesota's Governor Tim Walz?
Well, the defenders of democracy sure did find an interesting way to pick their new nominee, somebody who's never gotten a vote in a primary, and all of a sudden she's by acclamation the nominee, and she has picked a radical just like her for the most radical ticket ever in American history. I don't think that's going to sell well in Middle America.
How concerned are you, though, that the Democrats are now more energized, obviously, with this ticket than they were before with President Biden? And what impact do you think that will have on the race?
I think they're just grateful that it's not Joe Biden, because they knew that that was a sinking ship. We've watched Joe Biden for the last 50 years. We've seen him on camera. We've seen him live, and there is a decline. And nobody likes to see that in their American president. So they were able to ditch him after the Republican convention, and by acclamation got Kamala Harris. Now, what I think is interesting is they hid her for 3 years, and anytime she had an appearance, it was usually with hired actors, as case in point when she met with children to talk about NASA. Now she hasn't had a single press conference in 19 days since becoming the nominee, and now they're forcing attention on Tim Walz and his record to distract from the fact that I don't believe this presidential nominee on the Democrat side has any real record that is successful or any plan.
But in the last week, we've seen the race, the polls shift towards Kamala Harris and now Tim Walz and away from former President Trump and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. So if you look at the Cook Political Report, they put back Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, which they had just moved to the lean Republican column 3 weeks ago before Joe Biden said he's not going to run again. And now it's back to a toss-up. So what do you make of that?
I think there's usually excitement after somebody is chosen on the side that picks them. On the Democrat side, there's going to be excitement because they've got this new ticket. But over the course of the next couple of months before early voting starts, we're going to be able to portray them as they really are, with things that they've done themselves, things that they've said themselves on camera about the economy, about foreign policy, about the war in Israel, about the world in general, as well as their records, particularly in Tim Walz's case, of failure in Minnesota. And over the course of the next couple of months, we're going to see them being portrayed for what they really are, and I think that excitement will erode. When a poll comes out, generally it's done nationally. A presidential race is won state by state, right. So there's a small bump, but I still believe that this is going to be an overwhelming victory for Donald Trump.
So what specifically do you think Republicans, Trump, Vance, need to do to focus this race on and win?
Put Kamala Harris and Tim Walz's record on constant loop for the next 2 months. It speaks for itself, and it speaks in the direction that they want to take this country. It's about electrical vehicles. It is about Green New Deal. It is about DEI. It is about American weakness. It is about sympathy for folks coming up through the border to do us harm. It's for an open border. It's for a weak economy. So the record speaks for itself. Tim Walz has a very long 5-year record of failure in Minnesota and has turned Minnesota into a failing state with a higher crime rate of violent crime than the national average. He's got the highest COVID fraud rate in America of $250 million. And then there's also the character issue of, when he speaks, is he telling the truth? And I know that his military record has come up of late as whether or not he's telling the truth about it.
Well, what do you make of that? Because there has been some criticism, but yet on the other side, you know, they're saying, look, he had a very long military career, and they don't believe it was stolen valor, as some Republicans have claimed. What do you say?
It's two things. Number one, he said he was in the Army. He was not in the Army. He was in the National Guard. I appreciate his service in the National Guard, but at that particular event that was on video where he said, I was in the Army and I carried these weapons into war. Both of those statements are false, and veterans like me want to hold up our hands and say, no, sir, you were not in the Army. National Guard is part-time. If you were in the Army, you would be a full-time. He did serve 24 years. I'm not going to talk about his Iraq duty that he didn't go to. That's up to somebody else, but he didn't carry weapons into war, and he was not in the Army. And people who know better make that distinction because it's important. So are you going to fudge the truth a little bit to make yourself sound better? That is something all veterans have a problem with.
And let me ask you, before we get on to some other issues, I did want to ask you about the Senate race here in Texas.
Sure.
You think this is solidly Senator Cruz's race to lose?
This is going to be Ted Cruz in a walkaway. I'm not concerned about that race at all. I know both of these men, and I'm watching the political environment here. There is no 2018 atmosphere in 2024. Ted Cruz this is going to be a whooping.
You and I have talked about Israel before. You were over there last year. And so what do you make of what's going on, and how concerned are you that there will be a wider war with Iran and others perhaps in the Middle East?
It's always a concern, especially these days. If the United States is portraying weakness at the very top with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that is going to indicate to Iran, who's at the center of all of this, and their three proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis in Yemen, that they can get away with something. And I think the Israelis on their own are showing that the United States, thank you for your friendship. We're going to do what we need to do to preserve ourselves. And they've taken out 4 very high-level officers of Hamas, Hezbollah, and they've done a strike on a port in Yemen that they didn't think was possible, but they took out the highest political leader of Hamas in Tehran the day of the new Iranian president's ascendance in a room that he had stayed at before by planting a bomb 2 months prior. So if they can target that guy in the capital of Iran, all those leaders should be very well aware, and I think this was the message that was sent, that we can reach out and get you anywhere without any collateral damage. So try us again. They need to mop up Hamas in Gaza Strip. They need to get all of their hostages back. There are a number who are dead and a number who are still alive. And I've seen that fade away from the national media issue while Kamala Harris has expressed sympathy for Hamas and a ceasefire. They have to get those hostages back first. This assault was launched on Israel by Hamas. This was pure evil, and you have to meet ruthlessness with ruthlessness and win this war, get the hostages back.
And Israel also faces attacks from Hezbollah up in the north.
Up in the north is even worse, the potential for a wider war. I mean, you have 80,000 folks who live in northern Israel, now refugees in their own country because they've had to move out of there, because that's where Hezbollah has said, when we invade, we're going to come in the north, and we're going to take this over. They've already violated the UN agreement on where the line is in southern Lebanon. They've gone way past that. They have tens of thousands of missiles. Most of them can be guided, and that would risk a wider war. But we have sent ships as we should. We have sent a carrier as we should to show Israel and Iran that we're ready to defend our closest ally in the Middle East, and that's Israel.
Last question, and that is, what issue are you focused on in Congress? I know you're not going to be there too much longer because they're going to send you home for the fall, but what are you focused on right now?
We need to get these appropriations bills passed, and we've gotten the defense appropriations bill out of the House. That's the primary issue for me as a member of Defense Appropriations Committee. And so our adversaries need to know that we're willing to buy all the weapons and pay our people what they're worth so that we are well defended and we can support our allies around the world. And so I'm grateful for that, but we need to get the spending bills passed before the election. I still anticipate a CR because it's a presidential election year. I don't like that, but I think that's probably the odds-on favorite for what's going to happen.
Congressman Jake Ellzey, thank you so much. Good to see you.
Thank you, Jack.
We appreciate it.